Hi everyone, it's Dr. Westfall and back for a second live stream of sorts. I suppose it is technically a live stream, although I did not tell anyone about this one. So it's public on my YouTube channel, but it's not necessarily being broadcast to everyone on the planet in a sense. I mean, it is in that if you happen to notice that I went live, you could be here right now and you could be watching, but I suppose I should show myself if I'm going to talk for a little bit. But I'm just kind of checking right now to make sure that everything is up and running. The software I'm using for this, by the way, is Open Broadcast Studio. It's a piece of software that's been around for a number of years now. A lot of people do use it. Uh, this whole setup, like I've mentioned a few times, is something that I'm going to talk about with my faculty colleagues, let them know how I'm setting it up so that we have some mind share and some idea of what's going on in terms of how you do these things. Plus, I need to record these things anyway because we are still in the middle of an ice storm and we are still not back at the office. So what I want to do today is I will be talking about how to prepare a class meeting. This is a topic that my seniors need to know about because senior seminar requires them to prepare a class meeting, run a whole 75 minutes by themselves, which is kind of nerve-wracking, but also kind of freeing. You get the opportunity to do it. And then I'll also be talking a little bit about my HyFlex setup here. So if you're a faculty member watching this at Delta State or anywhere else and you're curious how to do these sorts of things, you've got some context. So right now, as I sit, I'm running this off of a MacBook Pro. Of course, you could run it off of really any computer. Mac is just my platform, but you could do this on different platforms. OBS runs on anything. And then I've got a camera in front of me through the MacBook, the actual MacBook's camera. And then through a piece of software called Camo Studio, I'm actually using an audience camera, which is over to my left. You can see it right now. You can see that view. This is the camera that would normally be pointed at the audience or my classroom or whatever it might be to get their visual so that when I'm talking with a group, they can participate and you can see them. Of course, part of it is also how would you hear them. A microphone that I have here that can be set up on a long USB cable is an omnidirectional condenser mic. I bought this years ago. I looked it up on Amazon now. It's $30 or $35. It's a pretty cheap, but it still is a very excellent audience mic. So that's what I plan on using when I'm doing this in a classroom. And then I have a little stand for my iPhone that cost about $20. It's a MagSafe stand. Sets up, tears down real easy. So that is on the back end here. And then on my right, I have my iPad Pro, which I normally use in class as to show my notes, but it's what I'm using here to show my slides. So in this view, where you see the slide deck and you see me in the corner, on my right is an iPad that's got that full screened up, and it's using it as a second monitor. My computer thinks of it as just another monitor, and so it does not have any problem with doing that. So looking here, looks like we're all set up, and this is technically streaming. It's also recording. OBS allows you to record as well as to stream at the same time. So I have a recording of this. Of course, YouTube keeps the recording forever, so I don't have to upload the recording, but it's nice to have the video file in case I ever want to back it up or I want to put it directly embedded into Canvas or some other platform. So anyway, that's the setup we've got today. I would take a picture of it like I did yesterday, but my phone is being used as the audience camera, so I guess that's not going to happen. But today, I want to talk a little bit about this, how to set up a class meeting. This is obviously a topic that is very important if you're in senior seminar because it is the assignment that I've given you in this class that you have to do. You have to be able to present for 75 minutes. So today, we'll talk a little bit about what makes a good class meeting, different ways to present material, discuss material, and if this was obviously in the classroom, I would have people giving me back and forth and telling me things. I guess if anyone does randomly show up to talk in the chat, you can definitely talk about it there. I'll throw out hi chat, but I don't think anyone is in chat, so I don't think anyone's viewing right now. So that's also going to limit our discussion a little bit. And then part of this is also for people that don't have any background in education, a little bit about good teaching, a little bit about good pedagogy, that sort of thing. So in senior seminar, we require students to present content. And it's this rubric that I have on the right is what I'm looking for when I'm grading their group presentation. It's 75 minutes. And I'm looking for presentation of content. So are you actually presenting something that is valid? I don't want you making up sources, getting random weird things and that sort of thing. I want you to actually present content that is useful. I'm looking for interaction between the students and the group. You don't want to have a whole situation where the students are falling asleep. And I always joke that it's if you lose the attention of the students in class, that's bad. If you lose my attention as the person who's grading you, that's even worse. But hopefully that won't happen to anyone. I look for time allocation. You'd be surprised how many groups, especially the first few weeks as things are shaken out, I've had groups that think they have 75 minutes and in reality they have 35. And I do time this, and so I can tell you that's not an exaggeration. I've had groups tell me they have 75 minutes and they run 35 minutes. So what you really want to make sure is that you've practiced and that you've got some padding in there. You've got some things that you can stretch if you need to stretch, and you've got some things that you can condense if you're running short on time. So we'll talk about some possible things in a little bit that you could do differently, either add or remove them as you would. And then the last thing is evidence of basically preparation. You know, have you practiced this? Do you know how long things are going to take? Or are you just really winging it and hoping that good old Dr. Westfall is going to be lenient and not notice that you phoned it in? I try to be somewhat lenient because I know a lot of people, this is the first time they're having to do this. But I also recognize that you should be prepared for this. You've known about it. And the first groups aren't presenting for another 2 or 3 weeks. So nobody is taken by surprise by this. You've known about it since the first day of class, that you or yourself and a partner are going to have to present. Now, normally, if I am doing this in a class setting or in a synchronous setting, I ask people to think about some of the things that their professors have done that make 75 minutes go by really quickly. What are some things that you've seen? What are some things that you would recommend to others? What are things that when you're sitting in the classroom and you're thinking about my experience in this class, hopefully you are thinking about that sometimes, you're going, wow, this class went by so quick. And so if you've never done that, I would recommend before you start thinking about all the stuff you want to do, preparing a list of the things you liked. You know, what made things go by quick? Because we know time perception psychologically is very related to how invested we are in something. If we are invested in something, time goes by really, really quickly and we enjoy it and we think about it favorably. And when time is going by very, very slowly, that's usually a sign that we need to be doing something different or we're just not connected in. So if you're watching this live, which I don't think anyone is, you can do this later. But if you're watching this as a video, I would encourage you to pause for a moment and then jot down some of the things that make 75 minutes go by very quickly. I'll even give you a moment to pause. So now that you may or may not have actually paused, the next question that I'll give you a moment to think about is what do your professors or presenters that you've seen do that help you feel like you understand the material? What are they really adding in or giving to you that you go, yeah, it really clicked? Was it that they gave multiple examples? Was it that they shared a personal story about why they cared about it? Was it something completely different? Was it that they added something strange in, something noteworthy? I had a colleague years ago at another school that whenever he explained something in one of his chemistry classes, in order to really hammer home the point, he would explain it and then he would give a description that was a one-line description and had a piece of profanity right in the middle of it. And that got students' attention. They're not used to hearing their professors swear. And they remembered it. And they would remember that one phrase And that's how they got that question right on exams. That's how they got that question right on certification exams later. So sometimes it is a very creative way of saying something that makes you remember or understand the material. So again, take a moment and think about what helps you feel like you understood the material. Maybe jot down a couple of thoughts. I'll give you another break to do that. And then the last question, now that you've got answers hopefully to those two, is what do your professors or presenters that you've watched do that help you feel like you participated? Is it just things like what I just did, where I actually give you a moment and tell you to pause the video and jot things down or give you some time to think about it? Is it group activities? Is it engaging with your colleagues? Is it imagining something? Is it creative writing? Like, what is it that made you feel like you were a part of this? Hopefully, right now in our conversation, even though you're not here, it's not like you're on this camera, out in the classroom or something. You're literally just on the other side of the screen. But hopefully, you've got some sort of connection to me because it might feel, hopefully, it feels like a one-to-one conversation, even though this is a one-to-many. What are those things that make you feel like you participated in a class? Give you another moment. Jot down those. Jot down some additional things on any of the previous questions, because these are the brainstorming moments that will help you as you prepare your class meeting. Okay, well, let's talk about some actual ideas then for presenting your content. One of the things that I start off right away telling my students is that there are many good ways to present content. There are also many bad ways. And that leads us to my first point, which is PowerPoint is often an answer, but is not always the answer. This presentation that you see behind me right now is on PowerPoint, full disclosure. But as you've seen, I also sometimes just want you focusing on me. And if I have PowerPoint up, you can't focus on me as well because you're trying to read the PowerPoint. Never put on PowerPoint something that will take away the attention from you unless you're prepared to have the attention taken away from you for a moment. So what I often tell people is if you put it on PowerPoint and you've got it over there behind you or next to you or wherever it is, pause for a moment every time you do a transition because you know people are reading it and they're not listening to you. We can't read something and listen to someone with 100% attention either way. You'll divide their attention. So PowerPoint is often an answer. It's not always the answer, and it's not required for this presentation. You could do 75 minutes with no PowerPoint. Years ago, I had a projector blow out the first week of class. It took a whole week to get the projector back up and running in the classroom, and I just taught using the whiteboard and using my charismatic personality. And that was fun for me. I don't know if it was that much fun for the students, but I enjoyed it and enjoyed stretching outside the box a little bit. I had a colleague one time years ago say that she was giving a presentation at a conference. PowerPoint went out and she needed to show a bar chart of people of different heights, and she literally took people from the audience and said, okay, you're about 6'6", you come over here, you stand here, and you're about 6 foot, why don't you come over and stand here? And she jokingly said, okay, this person represents this group and this person represents that group. That was a novel way of getting past a limitation of technology. If she hadn't been able to think on her feet like that, her presentation might have suffered. In this case, her presentation was probably very humorous because people were not expecting that. So PowerPoint is an answer many times. It's not the only answer. The other topic, and one of the things I've told you last couple of class meetings, is that I'd like you to prepare something in advance for the class. Give me a reading or something I can distribute so that when they walk in for your 75 minutes, they're not walking in cold. And that means that you have to think about, well, what have they read? Has everyone read? Has everyone not read? I've had class meetings where everyone has read because they know there might be a quiz, so they've read. I've also had class meetings where no one has read because they didn't think there was going to be a quiz, and they also thought we were going to play the Dora the Explorer game where I would ask a question and then we would pause and then I would answer my own question. And sometimes I use that example in class and say, we're not Dora the Explorer. I'm not Dora the Explorer. I don't look like Dora the Explorer. We're not going to play that game. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to require you to answer it. But here's the problem. Why were people reading with that example? Well, it's because they knew there was going to be a quiz. I was holding them accountable. And when you hold people accountable, they will often read, but you can also have issues of anger, issues of people, taking the wrong things away from it. If you hold them accountable, you can have a very productive meeting, and you can also have an unproductive meeting, because if you were just going to go over the same things that were in the reading, people aren't going to listen to you. They're going to look at you and go, well, I already read this. Why are you telling me this again? At the same time, if you don't hold people accountable, the meeting might be extremely unproductive because you jump right in and nobody knows what you're talking about. So what can you assume? Well, you are students and you are presenting to other students. If you give me something to distribute, I would assume that some people are going to read it, some people are not going to read it. But you can't assume everyone read it. You also can't assume that nobody read it. Next thing that I'll mention, or an idea, is to find at least 3 ways to say the same thing if possible. Now, again, I mentioned that if you are using PowerPoint, people's attention is divided. They're looking at you, they're also looking at the PowerPoint, they're also probably looking at their phones, they're also probably looking, have other things going on in their mind. So sometimes you have to find multiple ways to say the same thing. That might be trying to direct people's attention back to you to say it in a different way. That might be putting it on the PowerPoint slide. That might be putting it in a handout. But you are trying to frame the same thing in multiple ways, multiple modalities, so that it sticks and gets into someone's mind and creates a rich memory trace. If you took cognition at any time, you know about the depths of processing theory, the idea that the more attention we put to something, the stronger the memory trace it creates for us. So if you can, find at least 3 ways to say the same thing. And if you've been following for the last minute, I've said the same thing about 3 different ways. Similarly, visuals do help. If you are using PowerPoint, use it to its full potential. Don't necessarily just have bullet points and text. Even on this slide, I've got some bold and some different indenting and stuff like that to kind of help you visually understand where these things all come to pass. And this all 4 of these things really speak to this 5th bullet, which is that people have about a 20-minute attention span at best. This video right now has been going about 18 minutes, and that means that I'm right up against that attention span limit. And I'm not planning on doing more than 10 more minutes, because otherwise I will lose everyone's attention. So plan for that 20-minute period. And if you have 75 minutes, like you all do, that means you're going to have to change things up. You can't do the same thing for 75 minutes. You can't just talk at someone for 75 minutes. You have to find ways to engage them. And that's what we're going to really talk about on the next slide. The last thing I'll mention here is that pacing and timing is key. You have to know how long you're taking on things. You have to know how long to expect certain things to happen. You cannot do this if you haven't practiced. So that part of the rubric where I mentioned that preparation is important, that is obviously why. Because if you don't know how to prepare, you don't know how long something's going to take. So what are some good tips for discussion utilizing that content? Once you put it out there into the world, what do you do with it? The first thing is ask open-ended questions. An open-ended question starts with why or how. Those other questions that you might ask, the who, what, where, those are close-ended. Now, sometimes people ask a close-ended question that they mean to be an open-ended question. They'll say something like, what is it about this that's important? And someone will reply, X, and they won't elaborate on it. You're thinking, yeah, I wanted you to say X, but I wanted you to talk more. You didn't. Sometimes people do this in a do you think? Do you think that's what people do? And they're expecting the audience to go, yes, I think that's what people do because of X, Y, and Z. But what I've seen in classes very often is you'll say, do you think that's what happens? And someone will raise their hand and go, yes. They won't elaborate. You'll have to ask them to elaborate. So sometimes you have to ask an open ended question, the whys and the hows. And then you have to give time for reply. Big problem for a new presenter is feeling like they need to fill the air, not leaving space. And people need at least 10 to 20 seconds to think about what they're going to say. And so you have to give them 10 to 20 seconds. You have to pace yourself. Say, I don't need to fill up all the empty air with my voice. I need to give them some time before we move on. And if you give 20 seconds and no one says anything, then yeah, you got to pivot. You got to figure out how to get them back on track. But you've given them at least time. One of the techniques that's talked about in education is something called a think, pair, share. If you've never looked at the think, pair, share, you ask an open-ended question and you ask people to jot down their thoughts in their notebook. You give them a minute or two to do that. Then you ask them to turn to their neighbor and talk to them about what they wrote in their notebook. And then after about 2-3 minutes, you ask for the group to share, little individual groups. You ask them what they talked about. This, each step of the way, gives people a chance to get their thoughts out, and it holds them accountable. You know, if you ask them to think and you give 60 seconds or 120 seconds, a minute or two, and they're doing nothing, you can go up to them and say, hey, I actually do need you to jot this down. I need you to think about it. And the pairing part means that they did share something with at least one other person. And then sharing to large group, you've basically given people an on-ramp to participation. So think, pair, shares can be very useful, even if you don't call them that. Even if sometimes you change them up. You might do a think, pair, share, then you might do a think and share, then you might do a think and pair. So you don't always have to do all three elements if you want to get people engaged. Sometimes you might group people into small groups and have them then present to a large group. That's one possibility. Other times you might do rotations in multiple small groups. So, group in people into small groups and then give them a topic, and then after 5 minutes, move them around and have them do a new topic. You can also do different activities. You can do discussion-based activities, individual-based activities, handouts, little journaling, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different ways that you can present to people and then get them involved. The last slide was all about getting your content out there. This slide is all about engaging people in that content. Another way to think about all this is something that in education we call Bloom's taxonomy. And if you've never heard of Bloom's taxonomy, it's a way of thinking about different levels of processing that you're going to ask people to do and the action verbs that you use to describe that level. So there are many graphics like this on the internet. This is just one of my favorites. And this talks about those 6 levels: remembering, understanding, and applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So starting from the left there, you go from kind of the most basic form of processing, just being able to regurgitate information back, to on the right, the most in-depth, creating something, creating a new way of thinking about something. And the words that are in each of those boxes are the sorts of things that you would use when describing the activity you're asking someone to do. So on the creating end, it's things like blogging, building, animating, adapting, filming, writing, podcasting, streaming could go in there. On the left, you've got things like copying, defining, finding. I think we've all had instructors and presenters and people that sort of live only in one of these areas. And we go, I really would like it if you would make me do something other than this. Why do I always have to copy these definitions out? I'm not remembering them. I'm just copying them. And then we've also had very ambitious presenters that want you to be evaluating creating. And evaluating creating is great. It creates a stronger trace, but it's also mentally demanding. You have to think more. You have to plan more. But if you're struggling for what to do, Bloom's taxonomy at least gives you some ideas. It gives you wording that you can use. and ways that you can think about what you want to do. Let's talk for a brief moment about using audio and visual, because this is something that often people cue into. They go, well, audio and visual helps. It really makes it easier for people to understand something, and many times it does. But what is a bad idea is showing a video that's just a lecture or a PowerPoint. I've seen students do this, and it boggles my mind. You are showing me a PowerPoint presentation that another student created for their seminar course or for their project. You could just do that. Why are you showing me someone else's work? Or people are showing a demonstration that they could do themselves in class and would be more engaging. If you can do the demonstration in class, do it in class. So don't just show something if you can do it. A good idea is showing a video that inspires conversation. That's why people love TED Talks so much, because they feel like they can talk more through them. You know, a TED Talk is thoroughly scripted. It's not an on-the-fly conversation, and yet people think they are. People feel like they're having a one-on-one conversation with someone. That's pretty a cool thing that TED's been able to do as an organization with the way they've structured TED Talks. A bad idea is showing a video that is funny or surprising, but has absolutely no point. This is one of the things, there was a video in mind when I was thinking about this, and it was clips from The Office or The Big Bang Theory on conditioning. There's a clip from The Office with Dwight and Jim, and it's talking about classical conditioning. It's getting Dwight to expect a mint every time something happens. And then there's a clip from The Big Bang Theory with Penny and Sheldon where he's using operant conditioning on her. And I swear if I ever have to see those again, I will lose my freaking mind, because I'm just tired of them. They're the only clips that I think people can find for those things. You could do classical conditioning and operant conditioning in class. You don't need to show a clip from it. You could actually do it if you wanted to, and it would add more to the conversation. A good idea is using videos that are engaging, like I said, with those TED Talks, and things that are food for thought, things that are going to ask questions, that sort of thing. And a bad idea, using a video to avoid presenting. I mentioned that I record the time that you present. Are you filling all 75 minutes? And one thing I do is I use the lap timer function for any time you show a video. So if you're showing a video, I know how long did you spend showing the video. A 5-minute video is generally fine. Maybe a 10 minutes, okay. It's a problem though if 25 minutes of your 75 were taken up by videos. I start to wonder, did we need that much video time? Are you using that video to avoid presenting? So a good idea is to use the video sparingly and to have the class do something to break up your own presentation. Whatever you use, it should add to your presentation, not distract, take away, or slow down or repeat. Adding things to your presentation is key. Adding different ways to talk about it. Remember, try to say the same thing 3 times in 3 different ways. That helps build that concrete memory trace. So that being said, this might be a good time, if you are watching this video, to pause it and think about what you could do in your 75 minutes. Maybe just jot down, doesn't have to be a timed list of them yet. I'm sure you're many minutes away from having the full thing. And then once we come back from the pause, I'll give you a couple of 75-minute samples and just some ideas that you might come across or some things you might think to do. So take a moment and just jot down a quick list of the sorts of things you want to do, or maybe the sorts of things you want to avoid that you don't think you should do. And I'll sit here and have a drink of coffee. All right, we're in the home stretch. Let's talk a little bit about some sample 75 minutes. So maybe your 75 minutes could look something like this. Quick 10-minute quiz over what was in the reading. You could do this through Socrative, Kahoot, Menti.com, or just asking people questions. Just asking This would let you calibrate, let you understand, did they do any reading? Who did the reading? Did anyone do the reading? Helps you understand what you need to highlight more. Even if you don't do a quiz, just an opening discussion might be helpful. For the next 15 minutes, remember, 20 minutes is when you start to lose people. Do a presentation on the reading. What were the main points? What questions were left unanswered? What do you want to talk about more or less? Sometimes you might use a parking lot, which is when you put on the board questions that people had in those first 10 minutes, and then you try to answer them throughout your next 15 minutes. Kind of tells you, hey, this was something that was important. 25 to 45, small group discussion on the questions from the reading. Maybe have 5 groups, 5 questions. Each group talks about them, their own assigned question, and then they report back to the group. That will take up, those little presentations, probably another 15 minutes. Then 60 to 75, wrap up your activity using some form of evaluating learning. In our next class meeting that we're together, I'll be talking about some of the ways that you can evaluate learning, and you can use either an online system or on paper. So that's 75 minutes. If you noticed, you were only really talking for about 15 to 20 of them. You probably talked a little bit during the quiz section, and you probably talked a little bit during the group presentation. You gave your feedback, but you spent most of the time listening and most of the time getting the group involved. That's a good way to do it. Another 75-minute sample. Well, maybe you start with an opening video, something that is interesting, something that's engaging, gets people tuned in. Then you spend another 10 minutes with what aspects of the reading do we see in the video, connecting whatever they read to the video. And if no one read, it's going to be a little awkward, but at least 1 or 2 people hopefully did the reading, and they'll remember and go, oh yeah, reading talked about this. Then another 15 minutes on just presenting from the reading. What were the main points discussed? What questions were left unanswered? What do you find really interesting about the topic? Maybe then 10 minutes on individual activity on the reading, take an assessment. Sometimes when I'm doing a lecture on personality, this is where I give someone a little personality inventory and tell them how to score it. So we're talking about extroversion. How extroverted are you? Well, here's 20 questions. Answer them and then score it this way, and it'll give you an idea if you didn't know if you were extroverted or not. 45 to 60, people talk about what the results are. You know, sometimes that's the key thing. People learn something about themselves and they really want to share it. So that's a good opportunity to share it and get them understanding. And then at the end, a wrap-up activity again, some form of evaluation. Like I said, our next class meeting, I'll be talking about those evaluation activities and what you can do for them. So hopefully today, in our 33 minutes or so that we've been talking, you've gotten some ideas for your class meeting. You've at least hopefully paused, and you can always come back to this. I'll send out this video. You'll be able to refer back to it. It'll give you some ideas on what I'm expecting as well. This is not an easy activity. Asking you to cover 75 minutes on your own is difficult. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy and that everyone aces it, but you are seniors in psychology. You are equipped to be able to answer these things and do these things. So I expect to see things that inspire me, surprise me, give me information I didn't have before. And I also believe that if you start planning early and you talk to me about it and you bring me your questions, I'm happy to help you troubleshoot. I'm happy to help you brainstorm. Just don't wait until 2 minutes before your presentation or 2 days before your presentation. That's going to hurt you quite a bit. So this has been my second HyFlex live stream. Showed you a little bit more of the technology that I have going on behind the scenes. And eventually, you'll be seeing some of this in the classroom because I will start bringing this rig to class. Hopefully next week when we get back on Tuesday, we'll have a day talking about evaluating learning. And at that day, I'll record another one of these in class and have it displayed, and we'll go from there. If you have any questions, if you need anything, hopefully you're staying warm during the ice storm and that things are going well for you, reach out and let me know. Otherwise, have a great rest of the day.